everybody. Welcome to tonight's live stream, which imminently could potentially be sent to the BRB screen for the first time ever, because in the world of the purely theoretical, there's an Amazon driver buzzing around inside my apartment complex who's supposed to be delivering something tonight. Although I never really got any notification of that, I just happened to be looking at my orders in Amazon and noticed that it was out for delivery. So perhaps that may not actually happen, but you never know. So if I hear the doorbell ring, I'm going to have to send you off to that screen for just a moment, but I will be back as soon as I collect my retractable dog leash, allowing my little pooch, who's currently sleeping under the desk right now, for some nice walks. He got to spend the entire day with his aunt and uncle, adopted aunt and uncle, in a different apartment building in our complex, because today was the day that the guys came through to do the testing to make sure that all of the smoke alarms and heat detectors in all of the apartments were up to snuff, replacing anything that needed to be replaced. And that means roughly every 5 minutes for a several hour period, both fire bells and the loud chirping alarms would go off. And hello, Nawful. Nawful's in the comments wondering what LC82 means. That just means this is live stream number 82. There's not a lot of fancy stuff going on there. Although I am considering switching live streaming to go to my main channel instead of to this channel. Hello, Ayush. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. You'll find that I am, it sounds like I speak English well, but I'm terrible at reading stuff. What's going on over here? Anything exciting? No, 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 no. So, alrighty, just double checking that. So, yeah, we got some, so what was I saying there? Yes, live streams potentially flipping to the main channel instead of to this alternate channel, in which case they'll still happen on the same schedule. They'll just be on a different channel. And then I'm still split on whether or not we keep the post-stream replays on the alternate channel or here. There's pros and cons for either of those things. If I keep the live stream, or keep the replays on this channel, then chat replays will be a thing. But if I don't, if we put replays on the other channel, then the only thing to do is take the video that records at the same time that I'm making the stream, re-upload it to the other channel, and then with a little bit of trimming, in which case you could still see it after the fact, although not right after the fact, and you would lose the chat. So, oh, and hello, Ashwin. So I'm still sort of torn on that. Part of me wants to keep the chat with the stream and have that available on this channel here to help with discovery a little bit, as opposed to the other channel, which doesn't get quite as much traction because there's really only live streams on it. And then part of me is super OCD about the idea that I have 82 consecutive live streams and all of the ones from all of the Devembers on one channel, and then there would just be a cut in time jumping over to here. Oh, shoot. And I forgot to update the Stream Elements bot. So forget about that Devember project. We're not working on YouTube Editor. We're working on some other stuff instead, including possibly some questions from Ayush. But let's go ahead and jump into me pressing this button here, which hopefully still works. What? 2 for 2 on that. I'm running an even more bleeding edge version of OBS than I was during the last stream. I'm not even running the official 26.1.2. I'm running 26.1.2 and a bunch of extra commits that were added on. So still kind of afraid to interact with any of the controls whilst the stream is in full motion, but it seems to be working fairly well. I also discovered that the OBS plugin for doing the browser thing under Linux is potentially very close to getting the update it needs to hopefully stop it from segfaulting all over creation. needs to be have some final testing done, and then they're going to merge it in, and then hopefully someone will update the master in the OB studio, and we're good to go. If somebody sees the lower third pop up, let me know if that one is incorrect as well. I think I modified that one. I forgot that the Stream Elements bot actually says stuff in chat if enough people say enough stuff in a given period of time. So what we're going to be working on tonight, at least to begin with, and we'll see where we go from there, is continuation on last week's work on the project-specific keys. And now we are in Sublime 4095, the latest and greatest. So the tab shape is slightly different now. And one of the other things that I changed there is I used to darken my Mariana by 5% because it was just a little bit too light and thus washed out. There wasn't enough contrast there for me. One of the changes in this build was taking the base color scheme, changed its lightness down by 2% to make it a little bit darker, but that wasn't quite enough, so I cut mine to be 3% instead, 3% darker instead, to keep it more or less where it was, although the inactive pane ends up being slightly darker. But I think that that kind of works out. Let me know what you think. I'm also using the adaptive theme, which makes tabs that aren't the active tab somewhat invisible. So I'm thinking I may need to tweak the theme so that this state that's applied on hover is also applied just in general, so that I can see where all the tabs are, because I don't quite like that, but I do like the darker here as opposed to the default dark. Yeah, which is, I don't really like that lighter gray in the tab bar. I prefer it to be darky dark. Just helps my eyes. Speaking of which, I should probably switch this computer here to not contain that very light, bright thing up there. That's just my work computer. Otherwise, I may go mildly insane. Oh, I'm in drafts. No wonder. I have 53 mails in my inbox since the end of the day. Good gravy. So I'm thinking that the project keys project here is actually something that could conceivably be released. Also in that phase, Sublime 4, it's amazing. It is indeed, isn't it? It just keeps getting better every time. I'm glad I was sort of holding off. I think I mentioned in the last stream, oh, stop being such a jerk, Cable, that before I started covering Sublime 4 in more detail on the channel, I wanted to touch base with John and make sure that it was okay with him, and I did, and it is. So I was planning on making the video that came out this last Monday on Monday, regardless, which I get 2 days ago now. No, it's only It's only Tuesday today. Feels like Wednesday. So yesterday, but I'm extra glad that this build dropped in the meantime, so that I could put that part at the beginning that showcases the new look and feel, because the existing theme on all of the new functionality, the first time you look at it, you just think, oh yeah, it just looks the same as it always has. Big deal. So the fact that there's more action there, and I could say, this is what it looks like. We got this new menu action. We have this new caption. Tabs can be 3 different styles. There is some visual refresh in here, I think really helps. Yes, you joined the Discord, did you? I'm curious how many people might jump. That video and the last one that I did that wasn't a plugin 101 video are 2 of the quickest performing videos on the channel, which is, gratifying. I, picked the topic that is most on the people's minds, I would imagine. So I want to, keep that sort of momentum going with a bunch of other different videos on the same topic. For example, the things that you most commonly run into as being weirdnesses, like the color scheme is different, or the default cursor is now solid instead of smoothly blinking. And in particular, I guess, other things that people have just been asking for forever, like the new settings for the caption bar there, changing how stuff looks. I'm kind of thinking it would be nice if there was a Linux way to group windows together in tabs the way that Mac OS does. But yeah. Oh, you says you got the motivation from me. Oh well, hey, welcome to the Sublime Text 4 family. And Ashwin says, I honestly love the new AC in Sublime 4. It's more useful now that it indexes the whole project. Indeed, that is going to be the topic of probably a bunch of videos. Well, at least more than one, because there's a lot of stuff that's different in there that it's probably worth going into. So I'm thinking at least two, where one is just sort of a quick, this is all of the stuff that's new, and then another one going into it in more detail. But that one's going to take a little bit more work on my part to actually dial in on all of that stuff, unless I can find my notes, because way back in 2019, when the first build of this dropped, and that was like one of the main big things there, I was going through the change log that we had, which was pretty long even then. It's even larger now. And I was working on what all I would put in various videos, and I had a bunch of bullet points on covering the new autocomplete while it was fresh in my mind, and then it wasn't released right away. Like John's initial estimate was probably a couple of weeks on the Discord before it was going to be made publicly available, and now we're here over a year, and it's probably really, really close now. I kind of forgot some of that stuff. I've gotten so used to using it. Not that I don't understand it at all, but the subtle nuances of all of the different settings and what they do. So I'm going to have to troll back through the Discord for way back then to be able to see. Um, so it's exciting times. I also need to switch override audit to be uh, Sublime 4 capable as well. It's moving it into the new plugin host, which requires uh, a new tag, I think. And I'm kind of torn on that. I want it to be taking advantage of as much things, new features as possible. For example, being able to use quick panel items, the magic, what's it called? Quick panel list item, the details of with for its file browsing and stuff, which isn't going to work in Sublime 3. But by the same token, it's Sublime's 4 is new enough, in particular not actually released yet. I don't want to completely ditch everybody still on Sublime 3. Like when I switched it over, I for the last thing when we went to version 2, I put the last few bug fixes into a version that was gated behind fairly old versions of Sublime before the command palette became a thing. So I want to kind of do the same thing again. If you don't mind an opinion on shifting this channel to the alternate channel, I prefer this channel for a single source of truth for live streams and the other for focused videos. I get you. I got more votes on that poll than I thought I would get. Pardon me. And of course, the poll, at least the last time I looked, was split exactly evenly on move for the highest ranking votes to move the streams to the alternate channel, but keep the replays here and move the replays to the other channel too. So that made that decision a little bit harder, but I haven't quite decided yet. The main impetus to do that, like I said, is theoretically, if my live streams are on the main channel, there's a likelihood that more people will see them because I have more subscribers there. And the weirdness of, I guess, the algorithm in YouTube is, after spending a couple of years doing nothing but very very focused Sublime videos on a very set schedule, I managed so far since April 1st of 2019 or whatever it was that I actually started putting up regular videos, that YouTube sort of considers me an authoritative source for Sublime Text. So for a lot of things, a lot of topics, I float up near the top of the search results for a lot of people, which would make live streams on the same channel also do the same thing. But I'm not sure how well that goes over. I don't want to basically, drive away subscribers that I already have by them getting an extra notification a week. Maybe that's just me. I'm not very great at self promotion in general. Uh, which is why in the Discord and I changed my status to say what I'm doing, but I never really post an off topic saying, hey, going online now, because it feels wrong. But yeah, and the OCD of the whole operation too makes it seem a little funky. But it would be nice to get more eyes on, if you will. I've also considered the idea of doing periodic streams on Twitch too, although I think doing specific Sublime text focused development might be a little too tight a focus for Twitch. It might just have to be regular coding streams, maybe working on games. Hello, Zappa. Welcome to the stream. So, opinions on this. We have here what could be a very powerful package for only 92 lines of code. Error handling notwithstanding as a thing that's missing, for having project specific key bindings made possible by the fancy new action in Sublime Text 4 and its new API. What sort of features would we like to see in this? Or if you will, is there something that this doesn't already do that it probably should before it went public? I can really only think of one thing. Potentially two. For anybody that hasn't seen the stream, hello, welcome to the stream. And we do Sublime Text plugin development here. I'm using Sublime Text 4, the latest build, 4095, which just came out a few days ago, hence the different shape of the tabs. I'm using Mariana as the color scheme and Adaptive as my theme. And we're working on a package here that allows you to create key bindings that are specific to a project, which is something that Sublime does natively. You can make key bindings specific to the type of a file based on its scope and such, but you can't make a key binding that does something only in the window where a particular project is. Well, technically you can, obviously, because we're doing it here, but some of the new API that's available in the newer builds of Sublime Text makes it even easier to do. So we are doing that here. So the general gist is inside of your Sublime project file, you can now have an item labeled keys, and you can put key bindings inside of it whenever this project is opened. Sublime will create an appropriate key binding based on whatever platform you're currently on, which is the exact key binding that you see here, plus an extra context that makes sure that it only works when the project in the current window has a very specific name. And the two things that this does is when a project is loaded into the window, this is the new API endpoint that Sublime Text 3 doesn't have. Create this key binding and a context for the key to actually check it. So with that in place in this particular window, if I push Super T, we can see it printing that down because this window is part of this project, but this window isn't part of that project. So this key does nothing in here. So on the face of it, this works exactly the way we might like. You can include inside of your key binding this platform key here, which will make it generate this key binding only if you load this project on Linux, but not on Windows or Mac OS. And similarly, you can include Mac OS or Windows in this. You can do it this way to say, I want this key binding to be everywhere but Linux. Basically the same thing that you can do inside of a menu. And that controls whether or not the binding gets entered. So for example, right now, this binding is available in here, but if I said this key binding is not for Linux, then this file ends up being empty, just like so. So on the face of it, with the exception of potentially something more fancy than error generating project specific bindings in the status bar if there's an error generating this thing, and potentially the way this is re-raising the exception, it's going to spam something to the console, which is never really a great thing. As far as professional look in code is concerned, it's not great to have your package spamming stack traces to the console. Perhaps better to send them to a log file if you want to keep them. I believe this is here right now because while this code is under active development, when I do something stupid in here, all we see is a message that says that there was an error, but we don't get to see what the error actually was unless we re-raise it, which fortunately does not seem to be happening here. So that's cool. Let's go ahead and clear that out of there. So two things that come to mind as potential things here is if this wasn't here, um, what that means for the code as it exists right now is it's just available everywhere. So here on Linux, it generates the file. On Windows, it would, etc. Maybe when there's no platform specified, it should generate a default .sublime key map, not with the platform in the name, so that it would just apply to everywhere, because that's kind of the intention of not specifying a platform. Seems like something that might be a good idea. I don't know, I really know how much it actually matters in the grand scheme of things. Potentially it might, depending on what other key bindings you have available. The way that this generates key bindings, by the way, user bindings are still always loaded last and thus would trump anything that's available in here. And the other thing is we could listen for projects closing and delete the file that we created, uh, which on the face of it seems like a good thing to do, because that would mean that when this project goes away, the key binding file goes away just to keep the project directory clean. But we don't really need to do that because the key binding will only be active in a particular window. We do end up potentially with tons and tons of key bindings, which isn't necessarily the greatest thing. Pardon me for just a second here. Um, so I'm not quite sure what to do about that. How's the audio level, by the way? Is it a little bit too loud, or am I okay here? It seems like it's occasionally dipping into the red, but I'd rather have the signal high enough that people can turn it down if they need than having to struggle to turn it up. So those are the two things. Does anybody have any thoughts on if there's something else that could be in here? Is there something that could be configurable about this? Because I think right now we don't really have a lot of stuff in here. These are the things that are actually being created. So yeah, mostly the idea of removing key bindings is just because I I hate the idea of something that drops files but then doesn't clean them up after the fact. It kind of seems wrong. There's not 100% a thing we can do about that, because if someone was to quit Sublime and then delete the project, then we're never going to get notified that the thing was loaded or closed. So it's not 100% foolproof, in which case we could have a command in the command palette. That whole thing could just sort of be, begging, doing things. But something that I would like to do, and actually this might be a fun thing to play with here, is right now, the way this works, and we can sort of see it happening here, when this wants to save key bindings, it creates a file in the key map folder for the given project. And the key map folder is the packages path, the specific name of this project, and then key maps. And this is unpacked in the packages folder, which is why this folder is here but dimmed out. Ashton says, whenever you say audio levels, it seems it's always been the same throughout the live streams I've watched. I definitely tweaked it a little bit, I think before last stream. I have a limiter, not a limiter, can't remember the term right now, a leveler on there. Basically, if I talk quiet, then the volume is boosted up, and if I talk loud, then the volume is cut down. I want to say normalized. There's an audio term for that, but it's escaping me at the moment, and I don't want to click the button because it might cause the stream to crash. But yeah, now the other main goal is to get some equalization on there, but I need to get the VST plugin for OBS to do something other than segfault instantly as soon as you add something. Should be a preference for the user to clean up or not. That's an idea too. Yeah. A preference for automatically cleaning up, and then maybe a manual one, just because, as we say, it's not necessarily a given that it's possible to do so. The other thing that I thought is maybe we want to um, remove the key bindings when the project closes, because otherwise you could close this project and then create a new one with the exact same project file name, which is all that's used here to create the folders inside. As we can see here, I have two. I was testing in my override audit package where there's also a super T key, which is actually something we could test here. If I was to go to override audit in this window, super T prints the name of that package, whereas in this window, it prints the name of this package, which is the proof of concept of this thing. What if you closed this project, it didn't delete this key binding, and then you created a brand new project? Theoretically, there would be key bindings available here, but I think probably the better way to solve that problem would be, and I'm not sure if this is the case, if this was to create an empty file, such as it is, then it wouldn't really matter, which might be something that we should play with here just to make sure that that's the case. If there is a file, delete it. Fun tip, today is Visual Studio Code Day. Is it like one of their anniversaries of doing something? Or I saw on Twitter today in my feed someone that decided that they want to ditch Sublime for Visual Studio because they require it to have full Vim bindings, and Neo Vintages isn't complete enough. But there is a complete Vim package for Visual Studio, so they ditched Sublime for that, which is interesting because I didn't realize that Neo Vintages was still a work in progress to the point where it doesn't have all of the features that it needs. Everybody that talks about it seems to think that it's pretty great. Can you duplicate project-specific key bindings to another project? Technically, yes, if you just copy this thing over, if it was spelled the same, then you could clump it over there. Another potential, well, I say another potential operation is having a preference for some sort of default key bindings to apply to all projects, but realistically, if you wanted to do that, you could just put them in your user key binding. So that's probably not that neat of a feature, all things told. So what if the first thing we did was, whoops, hide that, pardon me. Did I, oh, I built that, didn't I? Whoops, yeah. Here we go. If not, keys return. This could be changed. So we could say here, as a to-do, are no keys, delete the file we would have created. If it happens to exist. And additionally, oh, stream elements, stop tattling that I didn't change that. Ayush, I did see your message in the Discord before the live stream as well. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask about that, you can do that here as well. Basically, he asked for potential help in creating an autocomplete plugin for the Python language, which I think was creating completions for Python in general, which can be a particularly potentially complicated operation. But if you have any specific questions or a description of what it is that you'd like to do there, we can definitely discuss that as well. So this is one thing that we might want to do here just to keep things safe, which would require us to be able to figure out the file name to be used in a way that's different from this, basically abstracting this code away, which is always nice. And something else that yeah. One of the new features, by the way, in Sublime 4, if you didn't know, is that whereas in Sublime Text 3, when there were code errors, they would be displayed with inline phantoms underneath a line that point at the error. Now, instead, we get annotations instead that do the same thing. And that is like quite all in your face. Theoretically, if the line was really long, it would fold itself over to the side and you can hover on it to see the whole thing. But let's undo all of that business. I accidentally built that when I didn't mean to. As a test, if we were to do something like this, when this gets loaded, this is the name of this, which is the name of the project and then the name of the module. I would definitely recommend your on-query completions video, though providing AC in general is a very vast topic. Indeed, it is. Yeah, there's. We have to revisit that to cover all of the fancy new stuff that you can do with the new API. But generally speaking, when it comes to auto completion stuff of the manner that Ayush was talking about, it's the preponderance of trickiness is less in getting the completions to Sublime and more in figuring out what completions you actually want. For example, if you wanted to inject function names only inside of the file, then you'd have to have some way to extract them from the file, which could be as simple as just gathering everything with specific, entity name function scopes. But then you also need to handle the case of what if the file isn't quite as correct as it could be? How would you handle that? Which is always the part of that operation that makes me feel a little. As a test of things, do we want to do that here? Sure, what the heck. If we went in here and did, whoops. We're going to do this, all right? So when this loads, that is the name. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and say, oops. Oh, right. Go like so. The super awesomeness of using Vim inside of Terminus, inside of Sublime to edit a file. We want to say, oops, don't do that. Oh, crap. There we go. If we did this, and we'll see what we're getting at here in just a second. When this plugin loads, it says that technically it's not package name, it's module name. But if we were to I always forget that. And I think I saw out of the corner of my eye Ashwin saying you should be using LSP. Yeah, I would, for something like auto completions of a complex nature, I would generally err on the side of if it's something that you want and you want it in the short term, an existing thing is probably the way to go, and LSP is preeminent for that. It works even better in Sublime 4 than it does in Sublime 3 because of all of the work that the developers have done going back and forth with the LSP developers. But indeed, I reinvent the wheel all the time just to learn how stuff works. And if you want that sort of experience, there really is no substitute for jumping in and actually trying it. So kind of have to balance that. You'll never hear me say never reinvent the wheel because that's pretty much the basics of all 82 of the live streams that have happened on this channel. possible exception, well, live streams, with the exception potentially of stuff in override audit, which is new, and the YouTube editor package we worked on for November, because that is unlikely to um, be something that somebody else actually used. There we go. Can never remember what magic that is. So here is what we have here. This Python file, when it's loaded as a Python file, the underscore underscore name part of it is package name dot module name. So if you were to take this and split it at dots and take the left hand side, you'd know what the name of the package was, right? But if we were to delete this directory, unloading said package, and then install the Sublime package version of that, which of course is just a zip file, I think we may need to quit and reload Sublime to get it to notice that that actually happened. I think, and my memory on this is vaguely sketchy because it's been a while since I played with this, that what you end up with when you do that is less a name like package name dot this and more a name like the name of the actual zip file. But perhaps not. We'll have to see. We got to scan back through the old thing here. That's the one from here. We still have pipe text wrapper doing stuff in here from a few streams back. Did I go past it already? I might have gone past it already. I guess the easy way to do that is to do this. Boy, there's a lot of things with that in the name, man. Is that not what I put in that thing? Well, that's interesting. What did I do wrong there? Didn't want to load that, huh? Oh, I put the directory name in there, didn't I? I really wish I could erase a bunch of text in Terminus by just selecting. Indeed, yeah. You're really at the merge, at the merge. You're really at the mercy of the underlying terminal emulator, like Bash or whatever. You can do. Doesn't even respond to that, which is kind of interesting. Does Bash respond to that in general? Maybe it doesn't. That whole control backspace to delete a whole word, something I sorely miss. All right, I think I did something stupid here. I put the name of the package in there, so I need to fix that. So let's unzip my test proj like so. I wasn't thinking about how I did that. And this. And by the way, never fiddle with packages while Sublime is running, because probably makes you sad. Okay, now we may need to quit and restart to get the functionality that one might expect. Whoops, I pasted that right. It still came out the same, huh? That's interesting. I wonder if that's Sublime 4 specific. And I'm only saying this because I recall I was helping somebody with the forum doing something with contact scripting. Contact with a K. It's a plugin for music production. And it had weird crunky code in it for trying to figure out the path of a certain file that it needed to be able to do something with, and as a Sublime package file, it would come up with the wrong thing. But it seems like maybe that is in fact no longer the case, which makes life preeminently better. But now it's going to bother me unless we actually test that. So if we went to, well, first of all, that's not there anymore, right? Cool. And if we did this, there is the file in there. So we could copy my test proj to home config sublime text 3 packages user, like so. I don't know why I did that. I did say in the Twitter thing that you get to watch me make the inevitable dumb mistakes, right? Because that's supposed to be an installed package. It's not supposed to be in the user package. My fingers just sort of default to that. So let's give this a little test here. Remember when we used Monakai and tabs had these angles? Oh man, I remember it like it was earlier this week. YouTube, yeah, YouTube editor does not like quick panel item, or Sublime 3 does not like quick panel item from YouTube editor. Wow. Apparently I modified that in a couple of different ways. Whoosh, boy, this stuff is broken like all get out. Pipe text doesn't work. It works there too. All right. Well, in that case, cool. Our lives just got that much better. Let's go ahead and remove installed packages, my test proj. Because what we're going to do here is get rid of this file and say this. Package name is equal to this, which would give us the name of the package that this plugin is in, no matter what it is, although here it's named project specific keys. And then we could copy this part down here. So this should still work the same as it always did. If I was to, pardon me, save this project, I don't know if it shows up on the stream, but I just saw that file dirty indicator go and then immediately reload. So it is indeed still working. And the idea behind that is just because if someone was to manually install this, you want this to still work regardless of what name they choose for the directory that they put it in. And so if you have something that's going to require a path in that particular regard, it can be a nice thing to do to figure out your package name dynamically. Now I'm really curious about what problem I was having in the contact strip that made me think that the name, maybe it was using module instead or something. Any case, no big deal there. What's going on over here? Nothing too exciting. So if we boosted this stuff out of here to come up with the key map name based on the platform that we're on, then we could try to delete the file if there weren't any keys when the project loads and add it if there was. Oh, and it's possible for there to be more than one. So yeah. that is sort of the tricky business here. As we can see here, if I double click that, inside of the key maps directory, which is going to be inside of whatever project you install this as, you're going to get a directory for the name of the project itself, and then inside of that is the key maps that it actually generated. It used to use this. Maybe will this crash my copy of Sublime? No. Okay. Um, I seem to recall there being an issue logged for that earlier today, deleting a file from the sidebar, but maybe that's only Windows, or maybe I misread that. Um, the folder is here because there could potentially be more than one key with that name. And well, I guess specifically because the file name has to be named this default Linux. So you have to have something in there to represent the name of the directory. Otherwise, um, the files will clobber over each other, and we would have to keep regenerating them every time you switch a window, which isn't something that's probably a fun thing to do. If I had to imagine, I'm kind of concerned about how dim parts of my MacBook screen are right now, because it really seems like they should potentially be a lot brighter, but there was a new version of Chrome, so maybe that's magic. I don't know. Um, maybe, yeah, let's do. It needs to create the folder, and it needs that. So let's do some refactoring here to clean this up a little bit. So the first thing we might say is project name, for example. Well, let's see. That's too long. So we might say project this is actually going to get shorter, which is good. We're going to take this and put package name in here, like so. We'll add an equals none, and we'll say or that. Now, is there enough to, oops, skip that one and go here and say name. So when we call key map directory, you can optionally provide it a project name, and it will, oh shoot, did I put the same thing in there twice? Yeah, that I already did that part. That part needs to be there. Whew, that could have been bad. Let's do this then. Sometimes I catch the bugs before I make them. Now we'll just let that go like so. So when you invoke this, you can give it a project name, and it will give you something in the packages path for this package inside of a directory named key maps, and the project name, or an empty string. So if you don't provide one, nothing gets appended on the end there, I would assume, but we can check into that. What did I say? ABC gives us a path like you might expect, and that gives us a folder. So presumably, if before we were doing this, that's going to be the name of a folder. That's going to be the name of a folder. Operating systems generally let you double up on path separators to make your life a little bit easier in situations like this where we're auto creating things. So I think that's probably okay. Right? Yeah. That's going to be the name of the directory that this key map files are stored inside of, which means that down here, that probably gets real mad. Yeah. Really, it's required now? Oh, I took that part off when I fixed it. So I think with that, this should theoretically work the same as it always did, right? This is still generating this file and updating it. Yes. Cool. So that allows us basically to clean this stuff up down here a little bit. We don't have to say this. And why exactly were we actually doing that when we actually had, oh, I see, key map dir needed to include that. So now this would just be key map dir project, for example. So we can cut that and go like so. And if it's not there, make it. And then we can stick that part on. And again, we could abstract that away into a method as well, just to make life a little bit easier for something that we are about to do. So the idea now is that this should still work the same as it ever did. If I save this, we should see that file go and nothing happens. And if I add some stuff and save, we can see it definitely regenerating, which is exactly what we want to have happen there. So that is a nice fix. And then we probably want a little something like this. Now, actually, the folder name is going to be a known thing. We don't even, we can say project for this one. The other one had that as a none to make it compatible with the existing call, which we can now fix, which is one of those things that I like to do when I'm refactoring stuff. You really want to make the new code backwards compatible with other calls that have already been made where possible to make your life a lot better. So we might say that this is key map dir of project like this. That needs to go like so. Fully, oh, actually we might call this key map file path, let's say. For a key binding file on the current platform for the given project file name. And maybe we want to actually swap that to be project file name, even though that one will end up being a little bit longer. Seems like a nice thing to do. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do there at all. Hello, Ben. Welcome to the Hope Things Go Well stream. I'm making myself sad by making lines longer than 80 characters long, but probably Pep 8 and various, or Flake 8 and various linters get even more unhappy in that particular regard. Really enjoying the new visual look of the new build, by the way. Although it is both good and bad that the inactive view thing follows these, if for no other reason, or maybe better, you can tell when the console doesn't have the focus, which caught me unawares a couple of times before I realized what it was trying to indicate there. I think somebody made it an issue for that. I kind of like it. Hopefully it doesn't change or becomes a configurable thing. The idea behind that particular change was that we could use key map file path for this part down here. Key map file path for project, and that theoretically should also still work. Assuming I did that correctly, which apparently I did not. Oh, it's returning none, is it? What did I do? Did I not return it? Oh, don't do that, man. Why is it doing that? If this is the panel that, oh, that's not the panel that had the focus. Okay. That catches me unawares all the time too. And you'd think with the color being different, it would be a little more obvious. My brain still hasn't quite cottoned to that one. What if this function to get the file path actually returned it back instead of just calculating it and then patting itself on the back for having done so? Maybe that would work a little better. Maybe we save this file and we see it changing. Right on. So that is definitely recalculating that file. Yay. Now is the places where this is being used is here. To make the thing for the project, and I think for that reason this one can stop having equals none on the end. Now we know it's definitely going to do what we want, presuming we actually call it. Oh, right, there was a reason why I did that. I forgot. How's your day been so far, Ben? Are you just, no, you're evening-ish, right? No, you're at work right now. Man, I need a post-it note for time zones. And I've been extra fried because we're having a lot of project meetings lately for the thing we're doing at work. One of the projects that is very multinational. It's just kind of been going on for, well, a while now. I probably mentioned this last stream too, but the chief architect is somewhere in the UK, so meeting times are just really wackadoodle. I gather it's later in the day than he would like, but it's still earlier in the day than we would like, and there's just no nice middle ground there sometimes. Um, So I guess we do in fact need to keep that, but that is of no big consequence. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Not that much smaller, maybe about that much smaller so we can see this code a little bit better. What was the other thing? If there's no keys, we can delete the file. Yeah. We're going to need the project to be able to delete files, right? So this probably has to move up here in the, something that also occurred to me was that maybe this could, no, I was thinking it could also track workspace files, but that can't really be a thing because you can't have data inside of your workspace file the way you can in a project, and multiple projects or multiple workspaces into the same project share the same one. So it's probably not a good idea to try something like that. Although in theory it would work, it would just be kind of tricky to set it up maybe. Something to consider anyway, I suppose. There could be another context for that. If for some reason you wanted to work in the same project in two windows and have a different key in one than in the other, why not? More manual setup that way though. Yeah. The thing that sort of twigs me on this is, and I think I touched on it last stream, the idea that there could be multiple files in here. Do we try to clean up all of them? Or do we just clean up the one that we would have generated? It seems like we're going to regenerate the key bindings in anytime a project is opened on a particular platform. That file would be created. So if we were to remove all of them, it's not the worst thing in the world if the next time you open the project, it pops them in there, assuming that you were working on a file share or something. But maybe delete it out on project close, and as Noffel mentioned, make it a setting if you want that to happen. Hmm. The other thing to do is if there aren't any keys in the project, also do it. But I think that would happen automatically. If this was commented out, then this key binding should end up, I would imagine, being empty, assuming I didn't break something. Really? Why is that still mad? Hmm. Well, now I'm just confused. Let me take another look at that. Save the project. It doesn't seem to try to do anything now, even though it seems like it probably should. Oh, you know, try because it returns back because there's no keys, right? That's the whole thing that we were trying to work out to begin with. Um, well, I guess realistically, the easiest thing to do is this, right? If that was there, then saving this would make this file generate empty, and we can just delete the file if it turns out that it's going to generate empty. Uh, Presumably iterating over a non-existent array. Actually, that would generate an error, wouldn't it? No, I made it empty. So, do you think it's worth duplicating some logic just to short circuit the notion of iterating an empty list, determining that the list is still empty at the end, the same as it was at the beginning, and taking the exact same action you would have taken anyway? Because on the whole, that doesn't seem like the worst thing ever. This wasn't originally intended to do this, which is why it's doing that. But we could say either delete or create, right? If there are whoops. This is something that I also wanted to put in there. If the key map actually has something in it and that folder doesn't exist, then create it. Basically, this is the bit that creates that subfolder based on the name of the project inside of the key maps folder because it's about to put a file there. So clearly, if the key map is empty and we're not actually going to put a file in there, there's not really any need to create the directory just so that we can not put a file inside of it, one presumes. Get the name of the folder, do that, and then we have the name of the file, and then we can say if keymap do this, else, what is it, os.remove to delete something from Python, from a Python thing, or unlink. I'm gonna guess unlink. Let's see. The method unlink removes the file path. If it's a directory, it's going to get real mad. And it's identical to remove, but as a Unix person, I tend to favor unlink. But we need to wrap that inside of its own thing, right? For now, keymap hat is empty. Save. Really? What the hell did I do? Oh, don't do that. File is deleted now. Cool. and then if this was actually in here, file comes back. Nice. And then the question is, should it do that on project close as well? This one is specifically always doing it as part of the setup, because as part of loading the project, we want to make sure that the key bindings are available. And in particular, if something external to Sublime modified the project file while Sublime was closed, then you want to make sure that your key bindings are kept up to date when the project loads. You don't want to just assume that if the file exists, it's probably cool, right? Is it worth creating a function to wrap OS unlink that just eats errors? Although in the end, we're going to want to do that here anyway. But then we would need to know what kind of thing we were trying to do. Error handling is one of those things that definitely needs to be in here before this goes into some sort of public distribution, but it's not necessarily something that we need to work on in a stream, I wouldn't think. That doesn't seem like it's the most interesting thing in the world. But key map folder, not null. We could also try to remove the directory too. Then we would be creating it just to delete it. Not the worst case in the world, again, if the directory wasn't there, right? Well, rmdir, I'm guessing, is the magic for the other thing. For Python. Look at that, it's a miscellaneous operating system interface. Righty. I guess the real question is, let's go ahead and do a little bit of this just so that we have something here. I need to do that. We'll maximize that window. Something that occurs to me, mind you, is we could just do this, which is something that I mentioned in the previous stream. Is it worth trying to use this to just delete that whole path? I get anything that's the equivalent of RM minus RF as a shell thing immediately makes me nervous as part of a shell script or a piece of code. If there's even the slightest hairline chance that the path that you end up with might not be the one that you expect. So I'm kind of better with the idea of just trying to delete the folder if it doesn't exist, and who cares. But also, I can't remember, are we running in 3.8? We are. So I could probably, oh, it automatically, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I forgot. Does this have a 3.8 or is it just 3? Yeah. Again, it's probably going to generate an error, right? Yeah. If the directory doesn't exist or isn't empty, file not found or OS error is raised. In which case, we probably don't care about either of those things. And we could just say os.rmdir for the folder. Just to see. So right now, when I save this, the key binding gets created. If we were to make this so that there aren't any keys, which is also the same as deleting this key entirely, because if it was empty, it would, or not existent, it would come out as an empty dictionary key. Then when we do this, the file went away and the directory went away over here in the sidebar, we can see as well. And then if we did this, it would magically spit back in there, just like so. We could also clean that up so that that directory was the name of the file and not the name, or sorry, the base name of the file and not the without the extension on it. Might also be a nice thing here. It seems like a nice thing to go. So we might actually, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Sublinet once again doing some stuff here for us. Clean up, key map, and a little bit of this, right? So whoa. How do we want this to go? I guess like so, right? And that reminds me, something that someone asked. F12 does that. Control F12. Someone had a question about going to a definition in a split window from a key binding, and they said that that key didn't work for them. So presumably there's something funky going on with their key map, because that seems to work just fine. Really loving that feature, by the way. I don't know if it shows up in the stream, but I changed the overhang in my theme ever so slightly to make it a little more obvious in one of those split pane type things, which one of the files has the thing, because it was so tiny my eyes couldn't distinguish it. So it's like 1% brighter than the normal thing, so that it's just barely visible there, but it's also putting a nice edge to help point that out, which I found a nice way to go with that for the time being. Probably don't need a duplicate copy of that open right now. I want to go there, man. Don't need to actually catch it if we're just going to do that, right? And the same thing again for if folder. I guess we could also double check that this could return one of two things: file not found or OS error. Can you catch more than one exception type at a time? I want to say yes, but I can't remember how you actually do it because I very rarely do that sort of thing. We'll leave that that way for the time being. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. This would be file not found error and OS error. I'm assuming that you just put them inside braces, for example. And oh, come on, Dark Reader. Give my eyes a break. What does this one return? Oh, it took itself back. Shoot. Probably better. Just to make sure. Semantically identical to remove. Is a directory. Okay. Interestingly, I guess we could just have one thing that if it catches the exception, tries to remove a directory. Okay. Is that the only thing that it can do? If you try to unlink a file that doesn't exist, it doesn't get angry about it? Really? Hmm. Stop that from being all cranky. Is it just me or does it not document that? I mean, the documentation tends to point that sort of thing out, so that's kind of weird. Very weird indeed. Hmm. You actually need to give it a name. I know I've done this before in override audit, but probably not that way. Now it's going to bother me unless I... At least I thought I did at some point. Maybe I didn't. All right, there you go. I totally lucked into remembering how that works. Good job, brain. I'm going to give myself one of those because that doesn't happen very often. Okay. So 4 errors that we expect to happen that are no big deal, like deleting a file that doesn't actually exist yet, or removing a directory which for some reason doesn't actually exist. Who cares? Delete the provided key map file, and if provided, also remove the given directory. Which is immediately bothering me because if we have a file name, it's a fully qualified file name. We could very easily get the folder from there. So this technically doesn't need to take it as an argument, but we already have it as an argument. So, I mean, got to leave something for refactoring later, right? Hmm. And then that should be the same sort of deal, right? So if we delete this key entirely, that folder goes away, and when we bring it back, the folder comes back. I guess you have to focus the file to notice that it's actually still there, but that's okay. And we're using JSON formatting here, or I would imagine, to make this look nice, if you will. So the context are expanded out in a weird way, but this isn't really a file you're meant to be looking at. You're meant to be looking at the one in here, right? So not that big a deal. So that's nice. So then the next thing would be, there's just a pre-close project. Okay, before we get to that part, let us say that we want something for this too. Looks, makes the code a little bit nicer. Project name for a window. And then the path item that I can never remember, which is probably something like, whoops. Oh, it's up here now. Okay. This is the thing we want for this, right? And I think I also mentioned in the last stream, technically we're running in the new plugin host, but I'm not super familiar with the new file path stuff. So that's why we're not using it here, but could easily be done. Okay, so the first part of this is going to give us the information that we want. So uh, if there is one, right? Yeah. Let's do that. The file name without extension for the project currently available in the given window. Remap that. Hide that for the time being, because then we can make this part a little bit nicer here too. Project file name for this given window, which I think means that we're going to have to clean that in just a second there. But when I save this, really? Is that not what I called it? No, I called it project name. Shoot. It looked believable. Okay. Now there's project specific keys and there's the file contained inside of it. I guess the reason why we didn't, no, that doesn't matter. It needs to have the extension there. It just doesn't need to have the extension here. Right. Oh, I forgot about that. If the key binding context doesn't have that, then the onQuery context needs to strip it too. And that's a little bit of extra work here for every key binding inside of a project. A concern? Add the Sublime project extension onto the binding when we add it to the file, because it's probably going to have that extension because that's the extension it has to have. Only strip it off for the name of the directory, but not for the other part. Perhaps the better, nicer way to go with that. A lot of options in that particular regard. Let's do that to get, no, I guess it's not going to go away until I click some stuff, huh? Okay. And you, there we go. And I learned that if you use a build system with command and run bash -c and give it the name of a file name inside of single quotes and pass it to G++ and you're on Windows, the error message that you get is that the file name doesn't exist, and that's fixed by using double quotes around the file name and not single quotes, almost as if GCC is using the single quoted version of the file name, except that it apparently doesn't actually display the name of the file name that way, or the person who reported the error trimmed that part out when they reported it. But anyway, I managed to solve somebody's problem with a guess. So whoop whoop. Let us perhaps take that back. No, put it back to the way it was for just a second here. Thinking about this logically, maybe we want it for the file name. No, we don't want it for the file name. We want keymap dir to not have the extension in it, but when we add a context, we want to have it added. So that, I think, is probably the easiest way to do that. So, oh, shoot. See if does that twice now. Or I broke it. Is it actually doing something with this file now? Oh yeah, no, it's not, because this file doesn't exist anymore. Right. I forgot. It's in a different folder now. It's this one that we're actually looking at. Okay. So if we undo that change, like so, then when we save the project, this file doesn't have that in the operand, and as a result, somehow that key still manages to work. Oh, because that other one is still there. So we need to delete this. Will this crash Sublime? Oh, that's less exciting than it could be. Let's go ahead and just clear those all. That's actually File Manager doing that. Okay, so just to double check, file goes away entirely. The whole key maps and thing is there. It pops out. Project specific keys is there, and the key does not work because that ain't the name of no project file. But if we put this part back, like so, then this will work again after we save the project and update this key binding. Then it will work. Problem, I guess, is Sublime's handling of Sublime project files case sensitive on the file name? Would a Sublime project file with a different extension still load? On Windows, probably. If it's going to work, it's going to work there. And on Mac OS, it would only be a problem on Linux. So that would be an indication that we need to, in fact, do that the other way. So let's take this part out like that. Let us find the thing that we did here and just say return that. So when I save this, that has that back in it again, and it continues to work even though that we're not tacking it on there. And then when it comes to this, we can say, let's hide that for a second. So in the key map directory where we're getting the name of the directory and also maybe adding a file name to it, we remove the extension, but pardon me, in the other place we don't. So we need to delete this one again to make sure that that is going to do what we want it to do. And then saving that generates the file with that in it, just to double check. That is touching that file. And the key binding still works, as one might expect it to. But the folder that it created is a lot nicer. And then when we come over to the project and say this, that directory goes away. That is not too shabby. So then the last thing to do here would be do it here, do it here. Def, what do we say that that thing was called? On pre-close project, and it's going to get the window. I do, by the way, have the new docs queued up for inclusion in Snappy, which was very tempting as something to do on a stream, but then we would just be looking at API documentation, so that's probably not as exciting as it could be. What part of this do we actually need? We want this basically to be a thing. And in order for that to be a thing, file name needs to be a thing, like this. And for file name to be a thing, project needs to be a thing, which is this, which probably has to happen first. There's the window to get the project. We pass the project to file name, and then we need the folder, and the folder is this one. So in order, get the project name, get the folder for that project, get the file name for that project, clean it up. And in order to test this, we're going to need an external terminal and go into project specific keys. Here's the key maps folder, and we can see something actually in there. If I was to close this project, then that folder has gone away. It is no longer present, which is nice. Okay, and then if we switch back to project specific keys, it was instantly plunked back in there. And just to verify things, over in this window, the key binding in this project still triggers, override audit. Whereas in this one, it triggers that. So everything's still working. Aces. That is not too shabby. And this is something that we would gate behind a setting. As recommended by Novel, I believe it was. If we look through the chat here, be a preference to the user to clean up or not. We can make it a preference and default it to true. And then if for some reason you wanted those files to be left behind, you could do so. This operation would still remain here because that is important to make sure that we update the key map files that we generate in the case that in the unlikely event that someone modified the project, we want to make sure that the key bindings are updated as appropriate, including deleting the file if there shouldn't be any. Or at the very least, generating an empty file so that any key bindings that might have been there from a previous iteration of the project will go away. So what would be a good setting name for this? That is a lot of stuff. Oh, I noticed Ashwin made a mention to a Visual Studio project about troubleshooting extensions. Is that extension by any chance try to disable your half of your extensions so that you can see if you have an issue or not, and then you say yes, no, and then it does the other half? Because I think that's something that's pending as a feature for package dev. But the last time that I remember looking into it, it wasn't being implemented because if you put a lot of things in the ignored packages setting all at once, Sublime locks up. So it's not something that package dev is doing. I think I was thinking of something like that way back 3 or 4 years ago, and then Fichtfall mentioned that he had a similar idea as well. So let's see. Do we have any settings here already? We don't. New settings file. And that would be in project specific settings. Here we go. Um, I'm really, really worried about that Mac. I gotta tell you, there's a line of dead pixels that goes all the way down the monitor, roughly 4 inches from the left, and it changes color. I guess not necessarily dead pixel per se. Something that for some reason the OS can't handle. Sometimes it's green and sometimes it's red. Can't be a good thing, right? I don't think that can be a good thing. Um, when this setting is set to true, closing a project will cause the packet will cause hmm, set this to false to keep key binding files. The thought occurs that it's gonna regenerate the file anyway. So was there really any benefit to not cleaning the file up? Debugging maybe? The more I think about that, the more I think that perhaps that's not the greatest situation. Maybe that's not something we actually want. We could actually comment this somewhat. Still marveling, by the way, Ben, at this line of code here that never would have occurred to me. I thought after the fact that it's very much in the vein of Python's idea that it's better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, i.e., instead of trying to see if you should do something, just try to do it and catch the exception. So in that case, this is very much in that vein. Try to concatenate this and compare it and see what happens. Whereas that's really not where my mind would go for something like that. In the short case, it really seems like something that needs to be special cased. Although it didn't help that I forgot which one of the two variables here was definitely never going to be none. Hopefully your platform name is always one of the three available ones until we're running some 5,000 build of Sublime text that's running under Chrome OS or something, and for some reason it has a different OS instead of Linux, I should say, because obviously Chrome OS is technically a different OS. That makes that a lot smaller too. On the whole, I'm liking them. Can't think of what else should theoretically be in here except for maybe something to manually delete stuff, but I don't know that that's really necessary. It's the sort of thing that you could always clean up on your own if you ever needed to, I suppose. I mean, I guess at some level it does kind of make me unhappy. But on the other hand, there's that balancing act of like, how do you do that? Find a list of all of the projects that are in the key maps directory, redact from that any projects that are currently available in an open window, and then ask the user in a quick panel or input, the command palette input to pick one and then delete the directory, including all of the stuff, because that definitely skeeves me out. But um, Apart from error handling and maybe changing this to use the new path class, this is a pretty small, tight example of, project specific key bindings made available by the new API. I mean, probably even smaller if Ben could get his hands on it and shorten up some of the more obvious bits of code even more. So in that regard, I am quite pleased with this project. I can't remember if I ever pushed up the changes from, whoops, last thing. I did not. Whoops. Well, I could do that now. Maybe if I could hit the word push. Oh, shoot. There was a reason why I didn't do that. Well, I'm going to force push those in a minute after I change this. So don't check out this code or you're going to be unhappy. Because the reason I didn't push it is because I didn't update that. I had a recollection that I did do that and then got interrupted in the middle, but apparently not the case. Oh, shoot. I never knew I needed dimming of inactive panels until it was added. Yeah, there's an inactive panes package that Fictfall had for a while. I think remember way back well, must have been like a month and a half ago when Will posted that screenshot image of stuff that was new and was getting people to say what was new in it. And the first thing that occurred to me is, hey, the command palette doesn't have kind information. And I didn't spot the other ones, like the new plus sign, I think was one, until he said this is something Fictfall would like. And as soon as he said that, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that tab on the right is a darker color than the one on the left. This thing has focus handling now. Made that very very obvious. Uh, you could do the whole key map thing in a single list comprehension, but that's way too much code golfing. Yeah, there's aspects where I'm like, I'd like to make stuff a little bit tighter, and then now we're just making it incomprehensible to even understand. Dimming of inactive diff hunks in merge. So, like while we're looking at this one, that one's a little bit dimmer. I would imagine that in a purely theoretical sense, maybe that might actually happen in merge if it gets the same functionality for theming and stuff that text has. Uh, Maybe these end up being slightly different enough that that would work. Although, if I had to guess, based on how the shapes of tabs in merge have been different for a while, uh, it probably has a slightly different theme engine in some aspects that maybe that's not as straightforward. Did you see someone on the forum was asking about the idea that anytime you look at any commit, one of the things that would be displayed is the list of all of the tags that that commit contributes to, so that you could see in exactly what tagged version of something any particular commit was in. I think that was the gist of that. It seemed, on the one hand, maybe handy, and then on the other hand, incredibly busy visually. If you had a lot of versions, like more than one, then commits closer to the bottom of the tree would just be an avalanche of tags, unless it only picked the most recent one or something, which is kind of like weirdly cherry picking data. Um, uh, we need to fix the git ignore, I think. No? Why is that? Oh, it's the project that actually changed, right? Okay, that makes sense. Don't mind me though, I just get random ideas when something new is added. A lot of great stuff comes from those sorts of observations. There's at least a couple of things in YouTube Editor that I hadn't thought of until you mentioned them during one of the Devember live streams. Well, really close to trying to come up with a way to upload thumbnails directly to YouTube from Sublime. Um, the tricky part of that being, I think, loading and encoding them and coming up with how that endpoint is actually supposed to work. My favorite code golf is using or and to avoid writing an if statement. Yeah, that one. I mean, maybe some people find it not fully readable, but I'm so used to that from tons of languages. Or using um, or to, yeah, I guess, yeah, using it as an if, like I want the value to be this unless it's none, and then that. Uh, Very common in Lua, so my brain is sort of wired for that. It trying to remember the other day languages that don't have short circuit Boolean evaluation in them. None of them come immediately to mind. Maybe Pascal, but I can't even remember what it was at the time. But there was something we were talking about it in uh, a work chat, basically work Discord, but not Discord. And it was a term that some of the other people on the team hadn't heard before. And I have a distinct memory of when I started learning, I think it was probably C, if I had to guess, the idea that the conditionals only evaluate as much as they need to in order to do something. So you can do things in C, like say if this is not null and reference the pointer in the second part, and you know that it's never going to try to evaluate that if it's null. Seemed to me like it was a new concept that I hadn't seen before until then. But I don't know in what circumstance a compiled language would go through all of the trouble of testing all the parts of a conditional, uh, even though it knows as soon as the first part is done that it can't possibly happen unless it was trying to allow for side effects or something. So I'm not sure if my recollection on that is faulty from one of the languages I knew before then, because I'm a old man and I don't remember that far back. I know I started with basic and then Pascal 3.3, uh, which was interesting as a tool because it was a COM file that was smaller than 64K, and it had its own little tiny text editor IDE, and I think some debugging stuff as well, if I had to remember. And then C and tons of other languages along the way, so much so that sometimes I forget what syntax to use for things. Did I not actually, maybe it was a concept that was there, but it wasn't something that was explicitly laid out? I can't remember. It would actually be nice if tabs had a way to add an icon. Indeed. I, I don't think I'd hate it if there was an icon next to a file, but I'm not sure how much benefit I would find out of something like that. Like in a package, pretty much every file that's open is going to be a Python file, so you would see the exact same Python icon for everything. Or if you're working on, I guess, a web page, you'd be able to easily distinguish your web pages from your CSS, but then kind of the content lets you know that. Python's even better than just having short circuit. Sits and or don't return booleans. Indeed, yeah. The that particular concept, I think I was first introduced to in Lua. 50% of it, or 75% of it, makes total sense in the context of Lua, because one of the code golf things you can do is replicate a C ternary operator by using the right combination of and or inside of something, and in place of like a conditional. and then you know that or is either this or that, but then for and the rules, if I as I remember them, were slightly esoteric, or at least not immediately obvious at first blush because I never did it enough. But the world is really your oyster when everything doesn't become a 1 or a 0, to some degree anyway. Um, let's stage this hunk. Oh shoot. We changed a lot of stuff here. Yeah. Pardon me. Oops. What time we got? 9:56. Does this have an actual track? It doesn't, does it? No, no, it does not. Hmm. This one does though. Yeah, 156. Oh, yeah, one of the things I discovered while I was playing with building OBS the other day, that this whole concept of when I click to move a window, it becomes transparent, really plays havoc with OBS's ability to capture the screen if the window is moving around or you do it for too long. Hopefully, it didn't take too much of a hit there, but it took me a while to realize what was going janky in the test recordings that I was doing. Uh, Incidentally, that thing I mentioned, I think in the last stream, about how uh, OBS in general uses GTK dialogues or Qt dialogues. I think Qt dialogues, but Ceph, the Chromium embedded framework library that the browser plugin uses GTK. So part of the reason why for a long time there wasn't native browser support in Linux in OBS, was because each one of them had their own message loop running and they got all up in each other's business. Uh, and the solution to that was if you could run it in one event loop or the other, but then people were getting angry that I think Qt file dialogues have better support for network shares than GTK ones do. I might have that flip-flopped. So if you wanted to access videos or some other stream resource on a network share, you wouldn't be able to do it except by looking in the auto mounter instead of seeing it at the actual location where it appears. And apparently they resolved that particular thing around about the time that the OBS plugin the OBS browser plugin in OBS Studio became something that would actually compile under Linux. For a long time under Linux, it wouldn't compile at all for that very reason. But there's still a modicum of crashing that's going on. But there's a PR that's waiting to be merged that was last talked about 7-8 days ago, uh, where they're updating a bunch of stuff. They're jumping a ridiculous number of Chromium versions to a more recent one and changing a whole bunch of stuff, which, among other things, would bring custom browser docs to the Linux version of OBS as well, which is also supposed to help with stability issues, because I gather that in some cases it maybe doesn't compile quite right. Um, I was playing with compiling my own version of OBS and had semi weird problems. Every time it started, it would complain that it tried to load dot dot slash obs browser and it couldn't find it, or dot dot slash lib slash obs browser, and it couldn't dynamically open that file. And I'd say, well, yeah, there's a reason you can't do that, because the binaries and the libraries are both in directories named bin and lib, but then there's a 64-bit part of the directory name as well as a separate directory inside of it, because it can compile 32-bit and 64-bit. So you're not going down nearly far enough and you're not going in nearly far enough. But weirdly, the browser component still works. Turns out that it's has a hard-coded call, or a call to DL open that's a hard coded path that assumes that it's installed in a very specific way, even though it's very possible for it to not be installed that way, which it turned out didn't matter because the symbol that it needs isn't actually in the library because they haven't merged that PR yet. But like I was saying, I would really love to experience a new version of OBS where I just download the latest or check out the latest version of the code and compile it, and there's not some weird CMake didn't find the right Lua library, or it looked for the header file in a different place than the other thing, or trying to figure out what magic option I need to provide to get it to do something would be really sweet. Clearly working on um, th- that whole different Linux distribution is not doing me any favors here. Your project name function there is a perfect example. Perfect example of what? Something terrible? I would believe it. That's this one, right? You can just do return window project file name and yeah. Um, Sometimes I do that, and in some cases I don't want the line to be too long or to make it more well, I don't know, obvious. This is something that I actually asked way back in one of the earlier streams. Well, probably in a more recent one too. Any function that doesn't have an explicit return value inherently returns none, right? But in what circumstance do you just assume that anybody that looks at a function knows that if it falls off the end, then it doesn't return none, or in what circumstances it might return none by knowing that window.project file name could conceivably return none, or intuiting that it could return none by the way that you're using it in the form of the something and something else? Or do you try to explicitly return none from something instead of just falling off the bottom to make it clear that that's an actual value that's being returned, which is entirely like a style thing? And I'm not sure, I guess I could run Flake and see exactly what the style guide has to say about something like that. But in this case, having this bit here jammed up like this, if I could type, sort of makes that line a little longer, which is, I mean, very much higgledy-piggledy. There are some cases where that happens, and it's, I could decide to split this down here or something if I actually cared that much. And basically, it's just sort of a weird bibbledy-bobbledy in my head about what I think looks better at any particular point. I have a very weird code style, I'm sure. I mean, me and my coworker tend to get in semi virtual fisticuffs over how I like white space to be trimmed off of lines, and he's happy to have just random white space dangling all over everywhere else. Or I'm very much the sort of person that likes the brackets or the parentheses to be butting up on stuff, whereas when he writes code, he uses this style, and that just really rubs me the wrong way. Um, Actually, for a long time, I preferred something like this to something like this. But that very much seems like a Pythonism to have the parentheses butting up against the actual thing. So I've tried to get in the habit of that one, but oh, I'm actually loving the new default dark. I now feel adaptive is very dark now. Yeah, I actually prefer the super darkness of this. As a matter of fact, I think I did this at the earlier thing here, but this is something that I use this theme in my sandboxed copies of Sublime to specifically remind me that this isn't the one that I normally use because this part seems too too light for me. I guess it's probably darker now than it has been traditionally. It's always struck me as more of a lighter gray than everything else. Or maybe the perception of that is different because Monakai has a much darker background than Mariana does. But it's nice to see that even here, inactive tabs are the same color. If I had a gripe about this, it's that the idea that I'd like to see all of the tabs and not just see bare names without having to hover over them first, which for a bit, when I was working on the video the other day, I thought was because I was using adaptive and it was just so dark that you couldn't see that I couldn't or I personally couldn't see the contrast color there until I switched to this one and realized, oh yeah, I see. Well, in that case, that might in fact be the thing here. Hmm. GTK requires the space before the thing? Really? Weird. I'm not even sure whereabouts I came up with that particular style, to be perfectly honest. There are less fist fights now because my coworker does indeed like the braces, or the, I say braces, the parentheses to be butting up against the thing and then interior spaces. Um, Also, the idea that should these two things be stuck together like this, I prefer a space on the end. Occasionally, I've seen them do this, and then you just want to, get out the virtual ruler and be like, no, you pick a side of the comma and you put the space there, and the front is not the right part because that just looks weird and wrong. That's not how you write English. That's not how you write this. GTK is a GNU thing, isn't it? I remember we had a hell of a time contributing to the C library and GNU step. I think I've mentioned that previously. GCC, we provided them a backend for their libobc that would actually compile code and do something with pthreads. For glibc, we provided them a fix to their, at the time, very broken memory arenas, where if it had like a giant slab allocator where it would decide to, allocate 500 megs of RAM or something for the process, and then it could slab stuff out of it. And if two threads in the same process tried to allocate at the same time, it would duplicate that allocation and make a second one so that it wouldn't have to do lock contention, which could cause the memory footprint of your process to just instantaneously double at exactly the wrong time. And when you're us doing something where every trade on every stock symbol on every stock exchange in the world is held all in memory all at once for the last 20 minutes, one thing you don't need is for your memory footprint, which is already gobsmackingly large, to double, because that would kick us over the 32-bit address space threshold. And in GNU Step, we also had to we provided them a bunch of fixes for their time zone handling code, which wasn't working the way OpenStep was. And they accepted all of our changes begrudgingly, except for the one in glibc, where they decided that, in fact, it was perfectly acceptable for a process to double its memory allocation if two threads happen to do stuff. Because who writes multi-threaded code anyway? I think that eventually stopped being an issue. They came to their senses about that. But for a long time, we had to have a custom compiler and a custom C library and a custom version of the Objective-C libraries to be able to do anything. GTK is not GNU, it's no. Oh, right, GNOME. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I forgot to edit that. I cleverly made sure that I updated the lower thirds for the last stream and thought, haha, you're not going to catch me out on that one. But I forgot that Stream Elements bot actually has a thing there too. I'm not entirely sure how I originally set that up, but I shall fix that one too, or perhaps stop it from doing that. But no, it's still technically correct that if you have questions about what we're working on, you can totally ask them. Whoop, pardon me. Upset the delicate balance. I actually managed to find replacement mics for my headset, so I can resolve that problem I had a ways back where the stream audio was just absolute crap, and it was because one of the two mics in the headset decided it didn't want to give a correct signal anymore. Then I had to rush out and buy a whole second one of these things to be able to record something because that was the easiest, you know, thing to do because I knew it would work. So I have two headsets and one mic between them, and I was afraid that that might happen again, but I found a replacement. So I have an emergency spare for that. I have emergency spare lights for the new light racks. As long as my camcorder doesn't explode, I have a duplicate of everything. I guess I don't have a duplicate computer either, but you can only have so much redundancy, right? Just know that someday there might be a video on the channel that doesn't have my face in it if the camera blows up, or you might get to see a Linux screen instead of a Windows screen if my laptop gets knocked off of a table or coffee spilled on it or something. And then mighty panics will ensue because those are both the sorts of things that are non trivial to purchase. Very tempted to get a 4K camcorder, but man, they are pricey. After I make my first $1 billion, I'll work on that. Or maybe I'll win the lottery. There's a project at work that's so underwhelming that everybody on it, including our manager, has taken to saying that they're going to stop by the lottery booth on their way home to see if they can get out of ever having to do anything with it. Oh, I was the one that pioneered that, by the way. Although I have been told by my wife that should we win the lottery, she will promptly retire, but I have to keep working because, I have to keep myself grounded. She's also told me that she's planning on retiring 5 years early, which means I have to work 5 years later in order to make sure that the deficit in income is maintained. Yeah, I was thinking that very thing. Maybe I could get myself like a Brio. I can't remember if that's the Logitech Brio. There's a couple of really nice 4K ones, or just another one of these to have as an alternate thing. But yeah, I couldn't help but notice that the for some of the ones I looked at, the price doubled as a result of, I guess, the Zoom boom, as we like to call it. So maybe I will just stand my ground on that. There was also a desktop microphone, a USB one with the nice shock mountain hypercardioid pattern, which would probably work really great for this and videos. Very sensitive, low noise floor and stuff that I was very interested in getting. And then mysteriously, between one day and the next, the Amazon ran out of stock, and I've been waiting for 4 months for them to know when they might get any more. And I don't know if that means that uh, there's like just like on huge back order because it was a relatively new product at the time, I think, based on reviews that I was looking at. But uh, I tell you, even for the light stands that I got, light bulbs for it seem perhaps more expensive than one might expect. Although, interestingly enough, it's a compact CFL bulb that's like this big. It's ginormous. So there's the big list of gear that it would be nice to have: higher resolution webcam, higher resolution camcorder, maybe a 4K webcam that would be high enough quality that I could have it on the tripod that you can actually probably see behind me there, instead of this. Um, and just to give the ability to zoom in on stuff and still have a 1080p picture quality. But yeesh, so much stuff. Um, I think we should probably call the stream here because I have been staying up way too late lately, and I totally need to commit this and also fix these two commit messages, and then force push to GitHub. And nobody saw these Git messages that are just actually telling you what it is without the verbiage that I normally put in those. So I think now would be a good time for me to press the magic button. Oh, you know what? Oh, come on, you. The Amazon man never showed up, or he never rang the doorbell. Ah, that is the bad. Um, oh, never mind. Maybe. Where is that? Check this business out. My package was left in front of front door or porch. Let me tell you something. That's not my front door. That's not my front door at all. I have a feeling that well, now you know what my address is. Ooh, but anybody that knows what my domain is knows what my address is too, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Feel free to send checks. Uh, I live in an apartment, and there's also townhouses. People have a very hard time remembering that apartment buildings are tall and townhouses are small. And unfortunately, you pass the townhouse before you get here. So, anywho, thanks everybody for joining here. Remember, live streams every Tuesday. Still undecided. Maybe live streams will jump to the other channel um, instead of this one. I'm still not sure how I might like to proceed with that. There is the potential for doing that and having the other streams here. Still haven't quite decided. I want to give some time to think on that, to give people a chance. So over on my other YouTube channel, in the community tab, there is a poll there about this very topic. Should I keep streams on the existing channel, move them to here, or on the should I keep the streams here? Should I move them to my other channel? Should I move them to my other channel but keep the replays here, or go to Twitch? If you have thought on that and you haven't already voted, go ahead and do that. I think we know which way Ashwin voted on that one, and we'll see what we come up with. But until the next live stream, thanks so much for watching, and have a sublime week.